Hi everyone. We're just waiting for the last few people to join the webinar, and we'll kick off as scheduled at 2 o'clock. So I'll just go to sleep for another couple of minutes and be with you shortly. So stand by, won't be long. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar that is being put on by Arken.legal. So, obviously the title here is Connecting with Customers Post GDPR, but before we start to get into it, some introductions. My name is Dave Newick. I'm the MD here of Arken.legal, and I just want to be really clear about one thing, and that is that I am not Australian. Instead, I am from the small, perfectly formed country that doesn't cheat at cricket. So now that we've got the pleasantries out of the way, I am really looking forward to working through with you over the next hour how to connect with customers post. Let's get into what we're going to cover. Oh, yeah, a couple of things, actually, navigation-wise. You will know through into the webinar that you've got a little navigation bar. So the orange arrow at the top, if you want to ask questions, it's the last little icon on that control panel. So feel free to ask questions anytime you like, and I'll pause a couple of times through the presentation and answer those as we go. And we'll cover the remainder of the questions at the end. There's going to be some polls, and we're going to do some stuff to get your thoughts as well, so it's going to be a little bit interactive. But in terms of content, this is what we're looking at covering. Now, this isn't about GDPR. It is actually a webinar about what to do to connect with customers after GDPR, but to do that, we really need to consider what GDPR is. So we've got a high-level look at that to kick things off. Then we'll really look at what that change means and look at some examples there of other big changes that we've seen in the industries of estate planning, but also elsewhere. And obviously, the meat in the sandwich, 5 strategies for connecting with customers is the reason that you're all here. So we'll be covering that off, and that's where we'll be spending most of our time. And obviously, the big wind up, the wrap up at the end. So let me get into it. What is GDPR? Now, before we even get into that, here's the first poll for you, because what is GDPR is kind of an interesting question, because you guys would have received a whole ton of emails, I'm sure, in the week leading up to May 25th. So how many did you get? I'm just kind of curious. So if you can answer that question for me, and we'll share the results as you go. All right, so look, what we'll do is we'll wait for that to come through. Okay, wow, okay. So the majority actually had more than 30. So that tells me 2 things. One, GDPR is a big deal, right? It also tells me that you guys spend a lot of time on social media and other sites. But my experience was also that I had around about 30 to 50, it was 20 a day sometimes towards the end stages of running up to the GDPR deadline. back to the subject at hand. What is GDPR? Okay, the first thing to really understand is whether you are a data processor or a data controller, or whether you're both of these things, and you can be both. So to understand that, you really need to jump onto the ICO site to consider what your responsibilities are, because that's really important. Now, basically, as the name suggests, a controller controls the data and a data processor processes the data. But there's a lot more to it than that. So the critical thing as we start to look at the strategies is to be really clear as which one you are and what your responsibilities are there. GDPR is a big piece of legislation, and there's some complexities there, and you just need to make sure that you understand your full responsibilities there. One of the big things with GDPR is that clients, and we're talking about personal clients here, so it's less business to business at this stage, although it's mooted that it will become a business to business requirement as well. So it's more about the individuals. Individuals must have actively, explicitly consented to contact and their data being held. And that's a biggie, right? So our suggestion to you is to be really explicit about what you're asking them to opt into. So don't run with a blanket opt-in. You can, it's just going to be a bit more risky. For example, if you ask them to, or if you're engaging with them, say around a newsletter, and you've got a blanket opt-in, and then you contact them with a direct email, they might say, whoa, hang on, I didn't opt in to a direct email. So be explicit about what you're asking them to opt into, I think is the best advice. And look, the other advice that you can have, which you might have heard elsewhere, is to get a double opt-in. So confirm that opt-in in another email, and say, hey, you've opted into newsletters and emails and whatever else they might have consented to. Next point to take on board, you need to have prior consent if you plan to contact potential customers. But, and this is a but, the legitimate interest clause in GDPR legislation means that you can still contact customers if you do have a legitimate business interest. But look, there's a whole lot of things that you need to kind of work your way through. And there's a great checklist on the ICO site, so take a look at that. If you've got a moment, just grab your phone, take a snapshot of that link. Now, here's a couple of things around this. Legitimate interest could be your legitimate business interest. It could be the individual's legitimate business interest. So it's not necessarily that they have shown you interest, but that's the most likely cause. But at all times, you must have the interest of the individual in mind. Now, as I say, there's a whole lot of other caveats and conditions around that, so do have a look at that checklist. But I wanted to just specifically look at that because there's some commentary that I've heard around the place that, oh, well, look, GDPR is great, but it doesn't really matter because legitimate interest means, well, hey, it doesn't really apply. Well, I can tell you it does still apply. And it's really important that you don't think that circumvents the need for individuals to explicitly opt in because they must do that. But for example, if you've got a database of customers, you could still call those customers if there's a legitimate business interest and you think that you've complied with the checklist as it's outlined there. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So moving on, customers have the right of erasure and access to their data. So be careful about what you write in your database. They have the right. Now, if they ask you to delete the data, you have to delete it. You cannot keep a record of their data. There are some exceptions to that if you work under financial or banking regulations where it's a requirement to do that. But fundamentally for the estate planning industry, well, hey, listen, if they want it gone, you've just got to delete it. Personal data now includes what was once anonymous. So you've probably figured that every time you go on Facebook and you click on something and it says, hey, you've got to accept our privacy policy now. This is exactly why. Just ask Facebook, right? Because they were collecting a whole lot of information in the background, nobody knew about it, and it got them in trouble. So cookies really are probably the biggest area that's caught in this clause. So just be aware of that. Next thing, you can't outsource your responsibility. So you are responsible for all of your digital channels. So for example, if LinkedIn did something, you know, it's your responsibility. It's not LinkedIn if something's being acted on through that channel. So that's data, you know, as both a processor and a controller on all of those apps and platforms. Look, I'm really aware that I'm sort of racing through this, but it's just a look over the top so we understand the structure so that we can then get to the good stuff, which is the strategies. So let's have a look at what kind of the outcomes are if you got it all wrong. Now, the Act says that breaches are liable for 4% of global turnover fine. That's pretty massive if you're a big business. Pretty significant even if you're a small business. Again, looking at Facebook, you look at the fact that they were actually fined under the Data Protection Act in 1998, which the GDPR regulations have replaced, and their fine was £500,000. Under GDPR regulations, that fine would have actually been 1.6 billion. So massive difference. As I said before, I come from New Zealand. The Privacy Act, which has many of the GDPR components, tend to adopt a different approach. I think here you're probably likely to see that there is more action being taken, and in fact what we're talking about here is that the Times has reported that Elizabeth Denham, who is the boss, the Information Commissioner, has said that actually since GDPR took effect in May 25th, so really a very short period of time, they have received more than 1,000 breach reports, and that was just me. So, you know, I got emails from people bizarrely thinking that GDPR meant that they could actually email me when I'd never heard of them before. So, look, there's all sorts of things that are happening. I expect that there'll be some examples made in each industry, but they'll have some other priorities, I would imagine, at this stage with people who are famous for behaviour in this area. Okay, let's move on now. Oops, I've gone a step too far. Let me go back. I've got another poll for you. So it's coming at you now. We are going to ask you about your data. So that should be popping up. What we really want to know is what percentage of your database has explicitly opted in. We've said implicitly, excuse us, we mean explicitly. So do tell us. That'll be really interesting. We know kind of where we sit as an organisation, so it'll be interesting to know where the wider industry is at as well. So let's share those results once they come to hand as well. Okay, wow. So the overwhelming majority of you have said that somewhere between 0 and 10%, 71% of you have said that between 0 and 10% have explicitly opted in. So I'm kind of been a bit bullish here. I've said that the estimate pre-GDPR of 75% of customer data being rendered unusable, caveat on that, but 75% is probably a little bit high or low. So here's the thing. Unusable in what way? Does that mean probably unusable because they're not explicitly opted in? And if you're overly reliant on that to connect with your customers, then that would be really quite catastrophic. However, under the legitimate interest clause, you may well be able to still use that data. So unusable, big hairy term. Anyway, moving on, high awareness of GDPR regulations amongst the general public. And that's because, hey, we're all affected, right? It's all about us, the individual, and the impact that it has on us with getting emails about holidays that we can't afford and don't want to go on anyway. So just be aware of that. That is an important point to note. Here's the thing. All of that means that it is a really, really significant change to the way we do business. So we look at that change, and as we start to explore that a little bit more in some of the strategies, we'll start to think about whether that's a threat or an opportunity, and if it's an opportunity, how we can make sure that we can leverage that opportunity, access that opportunity. But look, just before we go there, let's just have a look at a couple of organizations that dealt with some really significant change. Now, oh, no, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Sorry. Hey, here are some great rules for you, just to kind of wrap that up. To be clear, to be ethical, to be unambiguous, and to be specific. These are great things to have in any line of business anyway, but if you apply them specifically to GDPR, then I think they're very, very true. And that does kind of neatly sum up the GDPR regulations. You've also got to be relevant, personalize things, be transparent, to use understandable language, and to present trust. And that is such a key word, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Branding, absolutely, and that's individual branding, corporate branding. Really, that word trust is just so critical. I know that sounds, try it, and everyone goes, of course, that's the case. But we're going to explore that in some more detail a little bit later on. Now, what does the GDPR change mean for other industries? And look, I've been in Britain about 4 years now. One thing I've really learned is that Brits love history, and that's because there's thousands of years of it, right? In New Zealand, history means longer than 10 years, right? Over here, you can mean thousands of years. So let's just go for a little dive through some history and look at some organizations that have been affected by change, by disruption. Now, all you millennials out there are going, who is Kodak? What I can tell you, for you baby boomers, Generation X's, you guys know this stuff. These guys were the best placed global business to take account of the digital photography change. They didn't, they went broke. Polaroid went with them. Polaroid, cool thing, used to be able to produce a hard copy photo by clicking a button. It would sort of spit out the bottom of the camera, right? Anybody's ready to go and do digital stuff, you kind of think it was them. Didn't see the change, didn't adapt, not around anymore. I'm going to come back to Blockbuster in a minute. Interesting story about Toys R Us. If you've got kids, you probably bought stuff at Toys R Us at one stage or another, US business. Here's the interesting thing. Toys R Us saw the whole e-commerce thing. They went, wow, we're going to be online. So they went and talked to Amazon. Amazon said, of course, we can actually host you. They went, excellent. Let's put all our stuff on Amazon. We won't do our own thing. Unfortunately for Toys R Us, that meant that they were overly reliant on that channel, and Amazon was also working with all the other toy companies. By the time they sort of woke up to the fact that, hey, this is not working for us, they were too far behind the game, and basically 2 to 3 years to actually get up and running, didn't have it, went broke. So got to be not just on with the change, but you've got to execute on it properly as well, is probably the biggest thing to take out of that. Now, two companies that you may or may not be familiar with. The millennials amongst you are going, what, who? Nokia, Motorola. I think I've seen them in a museum. Look, they're big cell phone companies back in the day, in the 90s. Don't know if they're still around, but hey, listen, they're not huge. Absolutely overtaken by Apple, just haven't managed their change as well as others have to take advantage of the opportunity. Going back to Blockbuster, what's the story with them? Big, global business, renting videos and DVDs, also did a bit of a mail order thing, right? Went broke, didn't see the whole Netflix kind of, online video streaming industry, and went broke. So here's the thing, they're all companies that haven't adapted to change. You guys all know who this is. This is Netflix. Here's the backstory on Netflix. They too were a mail order video supplier. The big difference with them was that they saw the digital change and they got into it early. And now look at them, absolutely massive, massive business. So story of sort of two businesses really there, isn't it? Or two sorts of businesses. One that sees the change, takes advantage of the opportunity, goes and does something really cool with it and grows incredibly well because they've adopted early. Others either didn't see the change or didn't adopt to it, didn't make the change that they need to execute well, not in business, or are really so insignificant now that doesn't matter. So history. Good thing about history is that you can look to history to learn lessons for the modern day. So what we should take out of that is that if we were to start to look at the lessons that they're going to give us, adopting early is key. Making sure that you're aware of the significance of the change. I think GDPR is one of those significant changes in the industry, and we need to be really aware of it. So let's get into the meat and the sandwich. So 5 strategies to connect with customers. Now, let's have a look at kind of where this all leaves us. I think we need to think about new customer connection strategies, because if we look at the stat from the survey that we did, the poll, you said that less than 10% of your people are opted in. That's a massive change. 90% of your data, which is effectively not able to be used, perhaps in the same way as you used it before. As I said before, early adopters, I think, will have a competitive advantage if you get your strategies right and you start to move on. And the cool thing is that low-cost solutions exist right now. There are technologies available where you can put these things in place and they're not going to cost you a fortune. Now, I could sit here and I could tell you about, SEO and how to spend £100,000 a month on Google AdWords and all those sorts of cool things. And I'm not saying they don't work. Depending on the size of your firm, they absolutely have a place and they're a component as a part of your solution. If you're a smaller operator though, or if you're like me and you're really cost conscious, then hey, there's low cost solutions out there and you can do stuff that will give you bang for buck. You've just got to kind of think your way through them, and hopefully I can present some of these strategies to you in the next 10 to 15 minutes. All right, strategy number 1. This is where you hopefully start to get some real takeaways. So I will pause and allow you to take notes and things. And any questions from this section, kind of, we'll just deal with at the end. Did you have any questions on GDPR first, though? Pippa, have you got anything that needs to be answered?
No, we're fine. We haven't got anything on GDPR specifically. You must have covered it really well, Dave.
Okay, thank you, Pippa. That's my lovely assistant, Pippa. Anyway, look, evaluate data. This sounds really obvious, doesn't it? But in fact, what we've got to do is look at what data we've got post GDPR. So a lot of you are really clear about that because you know that you've got 10% who have explicitly opted in. But how many of you understand whether you have a legitimate business interest to reconnect with them, and equally, of course, with that, in a compliant fashion according to the checklist? But of your data, is there an opportunity there for you to understand which customers you have an opportunity to connect or reconnect with? Now, we've talked about the customers explicitly opted in. Here's some other stuff that you might want to kind of think your way through. Assets aren't necessarily about data and databases. Assets and data is often in people's heads. So in this firm, we've got a lot of really smart people. We've got a couple of solicitors who've been in the Wills and Probate industry for let's just say a long time. That's all they'll allow me to say. Other people have got great marketing and sales skills. Myself, I've come from helping businesses grow for, I'm just going to say 20 plus years. I don't own up to anything more than that. So your businesses may well have very specific industry knowledge that you can use to create customer relations from, or use as a data set, and we'll come on to that a little bit further on. Are you good at social media, or can you learn? Because that's an asset. That is a great way, as you'll see in the next little while, to start to leverage your data, start to leverage your the assets that you already have. And kind of inextricably linked with that, are you good at writing? Or do you know somebody good at writing? Or can you hire somebody who's good at writing? Little plug for them. We use a marketing company called Solve Marketing. Brilliant, really good. So you know, talk to them if you haven't already. So let's kind of wrap that one up. You've got to evaluate your data. You've got to know where your strengths are, what you've actually got as a starting point, and so you know what you're going to leverage. Well, let's look at strategy number 2. What are the other assets that you have? Now, every business has assets, and I'm not talking about, you know, bricks and mortar and things like that. What I am talking about is your brand, your business position, and what you can do to build on that. Now, let's ask some questions. Why would a customer deal with you instead of your competitor? How often have you asked yourself that question? If we're looking at a lens, and you're looking at your business, ask yourself, what is it that makes you different? What could you do to make yourself different or more different? Because these things are absolute assets. So you may have these already. You may already perhaps underestimate the value of those assets to your audience. So let's make sure that you've looked at that, step back from your business, look at what makes you different, and what else you can do to create that difference. Now, if there's anything that you take out of today's session, this is it. I've spent my whole business career really looking at the fundamental question, if you boil it all down, what do customers actually need? And then if you link that to what makes you different, then how does that help them, right? Or you want to think of it a different way. What problem are you solving for them? And it might be more than one. Now, look, let's look at it from a Wills and Probate industry user journey. So we might have a user who starts out, say, at 22. They start accumulating assets, got a car and things like that. They may need a simple will. So what is the problem for them? Do they actually understand that they face the risk of intestacy? So what is actually the outcome for the people they leave behind if they don't have a will? So there's a really simple kind of an issue to focus in on. Moving along the user journey, they meet people, they get married, they have kids, they accumulate assets, they maybe don't get married anymore, maybe they get remarried again, life changes, right? So in that section, then it's a different set of problems, isn't it? And what is it that you can do to help them understand that they've got that problem? And secondly, what can you do to create solutions for that problem so that they want to engage? We'll talk more about the engagement in just a moment. So how do you get that message to your audience? Well, this is the black magic, the ninja trick stuff, right? This is where if you can answer this, then you're really going to be in the money. And this is why the big companies do really, really well with their marketing. So what I'm going to suggest for your purposes today is this. Stand back from your business. Look at all of your marketing messages. And I mean all of them. What are you saying about yourself? What is your tagline? What is your information in and around your brand? So your values, and is it representative of who you are? What are your marketing messages? Do they link to the USP? The last thing is, and look, this is a complex thing, so these are just a couple of takeaways for you, but consider all of the different channels that you've got to go to market. And if we're talking about low-cost channels, social media channels are actually quite cheap and effective. So Facebook you can do for free, right? LinkedIn, you can get a LinkedIn membership for free. Webinars, really low cost. So there's stuff that you can do that will give you different channels to get a message to your audience. So wrapping that up, what other assets do you have? It's not just about your database. It's about the strengths of your business. It's about sitting back, looking at your business and saying, okay, well, what is it that makes me special? What is it that I can do to help my customer? Big number one takeaway for me, to you, hopefully, is what problems can you solve for them? And even if you start there and only solve that, then you're going to be in a better place. Okay, strategy number 3. Seems logical, doesn't it? Rebuild your opt-in numbers. But you say, well, how? How do I build my opt-in numbers again? Because if I'm down at 90%, down at 10%, I've lost 90%, then that's a really significant rebuild that I've got to do. So, a couple of things. Give them a reason to want to engage with you is the first takeaway that I'd say is relevant here. Now, why do I say that? Because they've got choice. Because they can talk to anybody and can go on and get information online really, really easily. So why is it that they would want to talk to you and engage with you so that you can start to rebuild or build a relationship with them? So give them a reason to want to do that. Here's a key thing. Social media and thought leadership can build a community or an audience, if you like. What's the importance of doing that? Well, modern day marketing would tell us that if you've got a community of engaged people, people who want to talk to you, people who are opted in, people who are considered quality customers and with a quality engagement, then you've got people who eventually are going to understand the messages that you're sending about solving their problems. And when they're ready to buy, who's coming first in their mind? It should be you. Now, look, not necessarily so. Law firms these days have dreadful problems with stickability of clients. You know, it's quite transactional. People can jump online and find a service, and sometimes they'll just go for the cheapest, right? But that tends to be more around things that are transactional, like conveyancing, rather than perhaps something that is trust-based or family-based or relationship-based. So what can you do to create some thought leadership through social media, which will engage with that community and audience? Now, the point here is rebuild your opt-in numbers, right? So if you're not doing this, you really want to start incrementally growing your opt-ins. Look for that opt-in at every opportunity with every contact points you have, always bearing in mind, obviously, the responsibilities you have under GDPR to comply with the Act. So here's another thing to consider. If we know what the customer is, and we know that they've got a set of problems, and we have some solutions to offer to those problems, and we're starting to think about them coming together in a community, that's fantastic. But what else can you do to pull people in to that community? You know, what are the hooks, marketing term there, to encourage them to come into your business and join your community? So have a think about that. What is it, and this probably comes out of your USP, what is it that you can do that is going to be special, that's going to be different? What is it you can offer? Perhaps say it might be, maybe take an example, you might do a webinar yourself. It might be on the tranche of the market that you want that you know has a problem with how to deal with disabled children in a will, or how to deal with capacity issues, or you know, whatever the subject matter area is that you've got to offer. That might be something that you can then start to both offer to your community, but you can also use it as a hook via your social media. So lots of options there. Now, in New Zealand, we say the world is your pippy. They mean oyster, but pippy is a New Zealand shellfish. So what we mean by that is that there's a lot of options for you to come up with content and topics to get people to engage. Right, moving along. I've got some questions.
No, poll.
Oh, poll, sorry. Yes, okay. So we're going to run another poll for you. Here it comes.
This is about technology, so I'm a bit early.
I'll tell you what, look, we're going to do that in just a little bit. Let's get through this next slide first and talk about the key word here, which is quality. Quality customers. So who are the customers you want? Let's talk about the user journey again. Say, for example, if you've got that young 22-year-old, and you might specialize in that simple will area. And so you might think, hey, that's where I want to be because I want to have that lifetime experience, and I'd back myself to keep them all the way through the relationships that I have with them, particularly if you're through all of the needs that they might have over that relationship, if you're a law firm. Or if you're a will writer, you might say, actually, that's great because I want those people to refer me because that's where I get most of my business from. So I really want to focus on that tranche of the market. Or alternatively, it might be people who are high value. So they might have a lot of assets, or they might need more complex wills. So what I'm saying here is that if you look at that user journey all the way through to probate and estate administration, you've got the choice now, because you've got 90% of your data, which let's just say it's unusable. It may not be, you might be able to use it, but let's just say it's unusable for the purposes of this argument, which you can rebuild with customers that you want. So the key thing here is quality customers. It's not about quantity anymore. So GDPR has driven a truck through the quantity volume play. However, the winner in this game will be the one who can get the most or highest volume of quality customers. And that's quality by way of engagement and quality by way of them fitting the profile of what you're looking for them to do. Now, starting to look at the acquisition piece. Where does that customer spend time? So let's take an example. We're based in Kent, and Seven Oaks is a lovely village around by us. So if Seven Oaks had a community of people who were kind of baby boomers or Generation X's, and you thought, wow, that's the guys I want, they're all earning good money. What do they spend time doing? Are they playing cricket? Are they going to yoga classes? Are they going to football? Are they into crochet? Are they into rambling? Are they into dog care? Whatever it might be. So understand where those people are and the sort of things that they're going to be interested in. That's where you're going to target your efforts, right? Because you want to be where your customer is. So know that, understand it, research it. You can really get some value out of doing that. Now, once again, I'm just going to come back to this point because I can't reiterate it enough. What problems can you solve for them? So you understand what your ideal customer is. Now you're looking at where they are, and you've just got to keep coming back to that fundamental question of what problems you can solve for them. Now, here's a key thing. This is kind of different. So if you're used to doing sales, or you're used to working in a sort of transactional kind of volume-based model, then this is going to be quite revolutionary. Starting a customer relationship without actually being about a sale is important. So what you're looking to do is to build a community, to build an audience, to give them information, to give them value, to build trust. So if you're building trust, then you're starting a relationship. And from that relationship, you're going to be communicating with them, you're going to be talking with them about their problems. You're going to start seeing them come to you and respond to your hooks, to respond to your offers, to respond to you being aware of where they're at in their user journey. So the life journey for them. So just look at your mindset here. If you're going into it trying to make a sale on every single customer engagement, it's going to be tough post GDPR. Think at a higher level, think about the value, think about the trust you can build, and off the back of that trust, you will start to see the results come. Think long-term as customer value as well. I'm just going to go back to that user journey as well. So if you've got somebody and you're picking them up as a 22-year-old, and let's assume that you're all spring chickens here on the webinar, you might stay with that person all the way through until they are in probate. So, what is the value of that customer? It's not about necessarily selling them something, transactionally moving on, get the next one. It's really about the lifetime relationship that you have with them and the value, not just that you can get from them, but that you can give to them as a trusted business advisor, because off the back of that, good things happen. Referrals happen. You start to really get some of the business that perhaps you wouldn't have seen in the past. So let's wrap that up. Quality is the key. You've got to think long term, and you really got to start to think about your relationship not necessarily being transactional. Okay, here we are with our poll. So here's it coming at you now. Okay, so kind of curious. How many of you have developed plans to use technology to connect with your customers better in a post-GDPR world? Now, look, we're a technology firm, right? So this is a subject very close to our heart. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the technologies. I have alluded to some of them: social media, your LinkedIn, you've got Facebook, you've got these sorts of things. Okay, look, results in. So 83% of you have said no, you've not considered using technology. I don't know whether to be scared or delighted. I'm going to go with delighted. Let's kind of explore this a little bit more to see whether this strategy here can really be of some value to you. Now, first takeaway here is to use technology to create time for yourself. And what you're going to do with that time is you're going to use it to focus on quality customer acquisition. Here's an example. We did a time and motion study with our core product, Arken. Arken is a will drafting product, best in the market. And we found that somebody who's doing a paper-based will creation, a bit like Groundhog Day, every day, took about 4 hours, sometimes longer, depending on how fast somebody was and how complex it was. When they did it with Arken, it was an hour or sometimes less, again, depending on the complexity of the will. That's 3 hours. You might say, so what? I say, wow, that's 3 hours that you can spend doing other things, growing your business. So great example there of technology creating time for you to do other things, because I can hear kind of you're all thinking, yeah, Dave, this is great, but I'm so busy. When am I going to get time to write content and post on Facebook and do Twitter and all these sorts of things? Got to create the time. Use technology to create the time for yourself to enable this to happen. Now, the other cool thing about this is that there are tools out there now, and look, we're doing a lot of work in this space, which is just going to automate low-level tasks. So if you're spending your time doing low-level things, don't. If you're spending time sending emails, confirming customer meetings, or low-level stuff like that, don't. Look, today there's free software available which you can access, which will schedule your social media. So you can write it when you're sitting there watching Corrie Street at night, or when you're doing something else during the day, just write it, get it there, check it, and then schedule it to go out next Tuesday at 9 o'clock, because that's when your customers are most likely to be looking. So automate your low-level tasks and some of your customer contact again, because that's just going to give yourself time which you can spend on other things. Now, here's the big one for us. The industry is changing, and if we go back to those firms that haven't changed, So, you know, the Blockbusters, the Nokias, these sorts of guys, we kind of see the impact of that, right? Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen here, but what I am saying is that digitization, automation is coming to the legal profession. It is absolutely coming to the Wills and Probate business and industry sector, not just here, but globally. So we're driving some of that change because I think logically there's going to be a whole lot of people in the younger generation who only want to buy online, and that is going to be their starting point to start a customer relationship. So I don't know how many of you are doing online wills now, but if you're not, come and talk to us, because I tell you what, that is a real opportunity for you to connect with customers, even if it's just as a hook. So there's all sorts of things that you can do there to create an opportunity to engage. It's the most logical way. It's going to give you an opportunity to advance your thinking around accessing the digital revolution and things that are happening in the industry. You'd be ahead of the curve just in the same way, I guess, that Netflix was, because they saw it coming, they got on board early, and they started to understand it and work with it. So to wrap that up as a standalone point, most of us said that we didn't think about using technology. I urge you to look at what's in front of you, what the options are to use technology, and there's a couple of options there. There's a lot more there that we could talk to you about, but I'm starting to run out of time now. So moving right along, let's do the wrap up here. So first things first, going right back to the start, you really need to know and understand your GDPR obligations and what the regulations actually say. And off the back of that, you really should establish your post GDPR strategy. And it can change, it can move, you know, but you've got to be able to lock something down and do something, because doing nothing is not an option, because change is coming. And GDPR is the first big change, and you've just got to respond. So it is an opportunity. If you look at those organizations that took advantage of the opportunity, they did really, really well. You're here today trying to find out about how to take advantage of those opportunities. So if you go into it with the mindset that it's an opportunity, then you'll be there first and be in a very good position. Look to technology to enable your change. Look, as I say, I may be biased because I run a technology firm, but there are solutions out there which are really far and away above anything that has ever been available to our industry at any other time. So they can make a profound difference to your business. Keep going on the wrap up. You really got to know your customers and find new ways to engage with them. Focus on quality. Quantity is dead. Stop thinking about quantity. Instead, think about the quantity of quality that you get. Really key takeaway in terms of being a trusted business advisor and using your technology to automate your low-level tasks to enable that to happen. So be careful about where you invest your energy. Look for the ways to engage with quality customers through content creation, social media campaigns. Look, if you don't know how to do it, there's lots of kind of help online, funnily enough. There's some great books, which is like Facebook for Dummies and AdWords for Dummies and social media campaigns for dummies. I'm not calling you dummies, by the way, but I've read them all, they're great. So if you don't know what that is, jump on, get schooled up, because there's lots and lots of opportunities there. Key thing there, connecting with engaged, opted-in customers, because that's where your value is going to be, and you need to do that through thinking long-term and building or rebuilding a community. Now, hey, we're in Britain. I can't have a webinar without talking about Winston Churchill. This guy obviously saw a lot of change. So he didn't change the amount of whiskey he drank or cigars he smoked, but hey, we'll put that aside. Great quote: to improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. And, you know, we live in changing times. So getting used to change and embracing change and using it as an opportunity is really important. Now we're going to deal with some questions first, but I just wanted to give you a quick outline of Arken.legal. So many of you would have known the business as DPL Professional. So that business has been running for 25 years. Our job, as I said before, really is to help the industry transform through digital technology. And we've got some really cool stuff coming to market over the next year, which will help organisations just like you to do exactly that. Our core product really creates simple and complex wills and other documents in real time. So that's LPAs and things of that nature, based on an intelligent, intuitive questionnaire, which is at the heart of what we do. Key takeaway, really, what we're trying to do and what we do with Arken is that it saves time, it lowers risk, and it does enable you to focus on high-level tasks because it is just so damn efficient. So, a couple of things you might kind of think, whoa, hang on, what about security? Because I hear that you guys are a cloud-based product. Well, I can tell you, the reason we're a cloud-based product is not just because we're a global business, and that makes sense. It's because it is the most secure platform available. You're talking guns, barbed wire fences, big data centers. You know, you're talking governments who use the platforms that we use. So it is a heck of a lot more secure than a server locked in a cupboard somewhere in the business, and that's why we do it. The other thing is obviously you can access it from anywhere, so that's really important. One quick little plug for a product called Trust Referencer. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It is a really cool product which outlines 110 different trusts. So if you're somebody who works with trust all the time, unless you have kind of like the great brain and can remember all the details of 110 trust structures and all the changes, then this is the product for you, because you can access it and just reassure yourself of the exact details and any tax considerations. So you can use that when you start to talk about the trusts that you can recommend to clients. So this is a quick little screenshot of our product. Pretty cool. So the thing on the right is the will, and that just drafts in real time. So if you look on the left around here, these are the questions that you might go through in every section. So you might answer yes to one, and that'll give you a different set of questions to say if you answered no to the same question. So really intuitive, really quite elaborate. Okay, wrapping all that up, key thing is that we really want to see you guys succeed. So it's about enhancing the profitability. So we want you to be productive. We want you to be confident that you are ahead of the game, ahead of the industry. And we want you to be secure, because obviously under GDPR, a lot of it is about data security. Now, Pippa, do we have any questions, or does anybody have any questions that they want me to answer? Because I've got about 8 or 9 minutes.
Well, the first thing is actually a suggestion from one of our listeners today, was talking about perhaps write an ebook and give it away, a short ebook on a subject, and give it away as a way of engaging other people.
Great idea, actually. And look, I'll just comment on that. I think that's exactly the sort of innovative thinking that is needed. You know, you're talking about industry knowledge. You're talking about years in a market. You can share some stories. People love reading stories, and I think that would go very, very well.
Another question that's come in from a couple of people actually is, what social media platforms would you recommend?
Yeah, good questions. Pleased that you asked them. Look, I think it depends on the nature of your business. So if you're a law firm, you're probably going to be more sort of LinkedIn orientated, and you'll release your content through that channel. It will also depend on the product, so what you're trying to do. Say like online wills, is that going to be, is LinkedIn going to be the platform for you? Probably not. You're probably going to look at Facebook. If you're a will writer, I would say run with Facebook, but also have LinkedIn and produce LinkedIn for you, or use LinkedIn for producing and publishing your content. I like Twitter. the value of Twitter is that you can use that as a hook and an engagement tool, because it's just short, pithy statements, 140 characters, and you can talk about other stuff than kind of the industry itself. So on that basis, Twitter has some real validity, and you just got to be patient. Because it can be quite disheartening if you've got 5 followers and you're not kind of building. But look, you just gotta be confident and start to build that journey and work on it over time.
Somebody else has said, could they get a link into this presentation at the end so they could take some notes off it at the end?
Yeah. So look, what we're going to do is we are going to give you the key information, key takeaways from this presentation. So we'll make that available to you. You just need to contact Pippa on the email address that's on screen now, or give us a call. More than happy to do that. And we'll include some links in there to the legitimate interest page where you can find the checklist on the ICO site. Alternatively, just jump on the site and search for it. It's there, but we can do that. And we might find a way to kind of answer some of your questions and things in there and include that as well, I think, Pippa.
Yeah. Another question was about could we remind them about the link to the ICO website, but as you said, we're going to give that anyway.
Of course, yeah, we'll put that in the takeaway. Now, hey, I've got a question for you, if you don't mind. So we're really keen to run more webinars. So if you've got any thoughts, any inputs, then please sing out on how valuable this was. In fact, I think we're going to send a poll, aren't we, Pippa?
Yeah, there's a feedback that should come out after it.
If you could spend a couple of minutes, that'd be brilliant. We'd really appreciate your feedback. And if this has been of value to you, then show us some love on social media. Hashtag Arken is probably the best way to go. But Pippa will put
it's at Arken.legal.
Arken.legal. Whoops, sorry.
Arken.legal.
I should know that. Do that on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Would be fantastic. Would really appreciate it. Well, are there any more questions, Pippa?
No, there's just one more about the cost of Arken, but I think we can follow that up afterwards.
Absolutely, yep. Cost effective is the best description there. So, look, it's an industry-leading product, but it's very well priced. So, come and talk to us. Really, really happy to walk you through it. Look, thank you so much, everybody, for your attendance today. Unusually for me, I've actually finished early, so that's actually a bit of an achievement for me. Really great to have shared some of these things with you. Hope you got some value out of it, and we look forward to working with you again. One thing I would say is that anybody who does subscribe to the webinar, we're always going to kind of leave a little period of time before we go noisy with the recording of the webinar, so that you guys have got first access. You can use the information, if that's what you choose to do, in your businesses before it kind of goes to the general public. So as we say in New Zealand, ka kite, that means goodbye. Thank you so much. Been an absolute pleasure. Goodbye.